This is Dan Schneider, and this is the second Dan Schneider video interview. My guest this time is a man named Vic Mignogna. He is an actor, a voice actor, a writer, director, and he's probably best known for the online fan fiction television series Star Trek Continues, which is a continuation of the original 1960s series in which he plays Captain James T. Kirk, the role originated by William Shatner. When we return, we will be talking for the next hour or so with Vic Mignogna about his show, his life, his career, and a few other things in the arts. So please stay with us. And I am speaking with Vic Mignogna. Vic, I found you first with the online web series Star Trek Continues, but you just informed me that you're probably better known for other things. Is it as a commercial or voice actor or whatnot?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Dan.
Yeah.
I appreciate the chance to chat with you. When I heard you say that, I thought, well, that may not be entirely correct. I'm probably best known for my voice acting work. Uh-huh. I've done about 300 different animated series and video games, many of which are on Cartoon Network, Toonami, Nickelodeon, that kind of stuff. Shows like Full Metal Alchemist, Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon. So, if I had to answer that question, what are you most well known for? I'd probably say it was the voice acting work. Although, there is a very huge love of Star Trek and the original series of Star Trek in particular. So that is certainly growing, and I'm very grateful for it.
Well, but your face would probably best be known as the new Captain Kirk, I guess. Would
absolutely.
That be fair? Yeah.
That would absolutely be fair to say.
Okay. Now, I actually stumbled upon your series. I believe I was clicking around for something, maybe I wasn't even looking for interview subjects. I think it was on Vimeo, which is I think where the series, I don't know if I'd say originates or whatnot, and I saw a 5 or 6 minute commercial for the site. So let me just talk about that, since that's how I found you.
I think you were probably doing a Google search for the world's biggest nerds. I think is what you were doing, and that's how you got me.
Now this is fan fiction, and when I contacted you, I said the thing I found the most remarkable about the show was the writing, the acting, all of the major characters and the actors that portray them. You got the sense that you weren't doing an imitation. Like you're not doing the Spock, but you actually do capture a sense of not Shatner, but Shatner's Kirk, and some of the other the James Doohan's son who plays Scotty on your show,
right, Chris.
So tell me about how you got started in this, about fan fiction in general, and the whole Star Trek Continues deal.
Well, in a nutshell, Dan, when I was 10, 11 years old, I stumbled across the original series on television. It had just started in syndication, and I fell in love with the series, and it just kind of opened up my world and my imagination, and I found myself building things, and I'd never built anything before, and then I found myself making costumes, and I'd never made any costumes before, and I found myself, wanting to shoot little movies with friends in the neighborhood, make my own Star Trek episodes, and I'd never done anything like that before, and so I kind of credit Star Trek with kind of jump-starting my creativity and my passions, and to do all kinds of different creative things. So over the years, or I should say over the decades, I've been developing skills in acting and production and directing and shooting. My college degree is in film. Uh-huh. My minor is in theater. I've been acting since I was about 10 or 11 years old. And so about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I was approached by another online fan series called Starship Farragut. Mm-hmm. And they had contacted me, and they said, Vic, we understand you're a big Star Trek fan, and we've heard that you're a really good director, and we'd like to ask you if you'd be interested in directing our next episode. So I went down and directed a Starship Farragut episode called The Price of Anything. Uh-huh. And the episode turned out great. We hit it off. I really liked those guys, and they seemed to like me. And so we started talking about forming a partnership where we could kind of pool our resources. And I had always dreamed of getting to continue the original series and do it in a way that was better than it had been done. There have probably been a dozen different Star Trek fan productions out there.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Some better than others, but I'm very familiar with many of them. And while I have nothing, I don't want to be critical of any of them. When I saw them, as a person who's spent decades in the production world professionally and acting professionally, I remember thinking to myself, this could be done so much better. It could be, the level of quality could be raised so much. And in terms of acting and stories and lighting and editing and characters and all of it. And so it became kind of my childhood dream to get to play this character that I loved so much since I was a little boy, and put together a production that just really excelled in every area. And so I started Star Trek Continues, and together the Farragut guys and Star Trek Continues built a 10,000 square foot replica of the original soundstage. And the partnership was that Farragut would shoot their episodes in this space, and they would benefit from having this big, beautiful space. And then Star Trek Continues would shoot our episodes in this space and obviously benefit. So that's how Star Trek Continues started. And from the very beginning, I wanted to tell compelling stories. I didn't want to just beam down and fire phasers and flip open communicators. Star Trek is much more than that.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to tell the kind of stories, the kind of endearing and compelling and thought-provoking stories that I loved from the original series when I was a little boy. And you need actors to do that, Dan. You need actors to do that. Anybody can stand on a transporter platform and beam down. But to actually, tell these engaging, heavy, dramatic stories, you need actors. So I assembled a team of people that I felt would best represent the iconic characters from the original series, and off we went. I never expected it to... I didn't expect anything. I didn't have any delusions of grandeur. It was a dream of mine to get to do this. And so I did it. I put a lot of my own money into it, tens and tens of thousands of dollars of my own money to get it off the ground and build the sets and assemble the team. And we shot our first episode, and it was very, very well received. And the second episode, I think, is even better than the first, and the third episode is even better than the second. So,
well, let me just ask you, because I know the third episode was shorter. It's only like 41 minutes versus 55 or something for the other ones. Was there a reason for that? Was it just the script that was shorter, or was there budgetary concerns?
No, it was just, we took as long as we needed to tell the story.
Okay.
It was purely, there were no budgetary concerns, and there was no reason to make it shorter except that that's how much time it took to tell the story. Yeah. Certainly we could have padded it out, but then the story, then you water down the story. So, we took as long as we needed to tell the story, and it just ended up being less time.
Yeah, and, that was the thing. I think maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I think I had seen the Phase 2, which had a Phase 2, which became, and I think you directed their last episode too, didn't you?
Yeah, I directed an episode called Katoomba.
Yep.
A very, very long time ago, and literally, I directed that for them several years ago, and it was not released for a very long time for reasons that I'd rather not go into here.
Yeah.
But it was actually, working on that production and some others that made me think, wow, this could be done so much more efficiently. and
Yeah.
so much better. So that's what I set out to do.
And I watched all 3 episodes of your version, and we'll talk about if you have another one coming up soon as well. But and then I sort of went backwards chronologically. Then I watched the Phase 2s; they have 8 or 9 episodes. Then I watched the Farragut's, and I watched a couple of other ones. And you can really see, it's like when I was a little kid, and you'd see the dinosaurs, how Protoceratops became Triceratops, and you can see how your show, and I'm not saying this just to kiss your ass, but it's clearly better, and it's better for a couple of reasons as a critic, and I can say is, number one, as you mentioned, it's character-based. Your 3 episodes are based in character, whereas I believe the second episode of Phase 2 was about was Chekhov aged or something, and it was mostly a lot of, I guess this was maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago, it was a lot of special effects. And I remember in the first episode of yours, no, the second one with Lou Ferrigno as the green-skinned alien, when he pulls aside alongside your Star Trek Enterprise, it's just like the old show. It's not with the razzle-dazzle effects,
Right.
but it doesn't look cheesy. It's homage. It's not cheese.
Exactly.
And that was the thing that got me, because I think so far you've done 3, and you're 3 for 3, and that they could easily be slipped into the original series and be thought of as one of the top 10 or 12 episodes.
Thank you for that, Dan.
Yeah.
In fact, that is one of the kindest, and one of the most flattering things anyone could say would be, and Rod Roddenberry actually said, he came to a screening in Vegas, and he stood up and he said, "I've seen Lolani," which was our second episode, and he said, "And now I've seen Fairest of Them All," and he said, "If my dad were alive today, I feel quite certain he would consider these canon."
Yeah.
And they are as good as any of as most of the original episodes. And I mean, you can't get better than that. I mean, that was such a wonderfully kind thing to say. But let me just say this.
Yeah.
It is not my desire to say anything negative about any other productions.
Oh yeah, no.
But facts are facts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, Dan, if you were to say to me, "Vic, you're not a great basketball player," I mean, how could I possibly get all up in arms and start screaming and posting all kinds of negative garbage about you on the internet? Because the fact is, I'm not good at basketball.
Yeah.
It's just a fact.
Yeah.
It's just an observable, statistical fact. So I appreciate, let me say this, I appreciate and I respect the passion and the love and the commitment that other productions put into what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's fueled by the same thing that fuels Star Trek Continues.
Yeah.
And I wish nobody any ill. I wish nobody any harm. Unfortunately, I don't think the reverse can be said, but I wish nobody any harm. I totally, my feeling about it is live and let live, just everybody do what you want to do, and allow people to express their love and their passions in whatever way they can. But when I started Star Trek Continues, I started it from the standpoint of a production professional and a professional actor and director and producer who wanted to make something that was as close to a continuation of the 3rd season as possible. And Doug Drexler, Doug Drexler is Star Trek royalty. And when I approached Doug Drexler about doing the effects, building the Enterprise, and making the Enterprise shots for our series, Doug Drexler looked me right in the face and he said, "I will agree to do your Enterprise, Vic, on one condition." And I said, "What's that, Doug?" And he said, "Don't fix it. It doesn't need to be fixed. Yeah. Make it look, I want it to look exactly like the original series." And I said, "Doug, you and I are completely on the same page. There was nothing wrong with the original Enterprise, nothing wrong with those shots, and I have no desire to make it look like, like J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
I have no desire to make it quote unquote better.
Yeah. Well,
And so that was the goal. And when you just talked about Zamenhof's ship pulling up alongside of the Enterprise and how much it just felt and looked like the original, that is our goal. We don't want to fix it. It didn't need to be fixed. If it was good enough for the original series, it's good enough for us.
Okay, Vic, let us talk about some of the other fan-based productions out there, like Phase 2 and some of the other ones. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know what? My feeling about fan productions is, live and let live. I know that I'm doing what I'm doing because of a lifelong love and passion for Star Trek. And so I don't blame anybody, who wants to do the same thing. I know that, there are a lot of productions out there of all varying degrees of quality and budgets and all that kind of thing. And my feeling about it is, I actually directed an episode for Phase 2 several years ago, and I really enjoyed their Sulu episode. I believe the episode was called "The World Enough in Time."
Yeah.
But my feeling about all other fan productions is, just live and let live. Let the viewers decide, what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy, and we're all making it because we love Star Trek, and I wish no ill will on anyone. I wish all of these productions the best, and like I say, live and let live.
In our next segment, we're going to talk with Vic about his career, his youth, and how he got into acting, and the various things that he's done, voice acting and that one. So that'll be in our next segment. Back with Vic Mignogna. In this section, we will be talking about who he is, what he does, where he came from. So Vic, you're a couple of years older than I am. I'm 49. So you probably, I think you were born in '62 or so. So
Yeah,
where did you grow up? Was it the Wonder Years kind of thing? Did you grow up wanting to be Buzz Aldrin or what?
I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. My parents divorced when I was about 9 years old, and my dad left, and it was just me and my mom. I'm an only child, and I'm I have a great single mom, and we had a very close relationship. My mom taught me how to use a sewing machine so I could make my own costumes, and she was always very encouraging about my creative interests. But ever since I was very young, right around the time I started watching Star Trek, I started wanting to experiment and get into all manner of creative things, whether it was singing in church, or acting in a school play, or making a uniform, or shooting a little movie with my friends, or sculpting out of clay, or making models, or whatever. I always had a fascination with all things creative.
Well, how did you get into acting then? Was this junior high school and you were going to be Nathan Detroit or what?
No, actually, again, I got to credit William Shatner. I really loved Shatner's Captain Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I'm concerned, there is no other Captain Kirk but Bill Shatner.
Oh yeah.
And I loved him, and it was actually watching Star Trek that made me want to act. And so when I was in school, or church or whatever, and somebody would announce that they were doing a play and they were having auditions, I thought one day I thought, hey, I want to audition. I'm going to try this acting thing. And I really enjoyed it. And so starting in probably junior high school, I probably started getting involved in smaller productions. And then I went to college, and I did a lot of theater, musical theater, dramatic theater, some on-camera stuff all through college. And then, after college, professionally. But I did you mentioned the Guys and Dolls during the break. I did Guys and Dolls back in Houston, probably about 10 years ago. But I've done a lot of musical theater. Camelot, Oliver, Fiddler on the Roof, You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, Annie, all that kind of stuff, and have always loved theater.
Well, I see also that you did Miller's The Crucible. Do you prefer, let's say, if you're on stage? Well, let me ask you, because there are all of these ghettos of actors. If you're on TV, you're either prime time or you're a soap actor. I've known people who in the theater, Broadway, off Broadway, dinner theater, stage, cabaret, film, B films. There's commercial. You've done commercials, voice work. Which are you most comfortable at, or will you just if anything appeals to you or it pays enough, are you going to do it, or do you say no, I don't want to do that? It could come back to haunt me.
Well, let me just say this: I'm not a great actor. How many actors will look you right in the face and tell you that? I'm not a great actor. I know that. I know enough about acting as an actor and as a director, as somebody who works with actors. I know enough about acting to know that I'm not a super great actor, but I know that I love acting.
Yeah.
And I know that I endeavor to do my very best as an actor when I'm playing a role.
Right. To use a metaphor, if you're a basketball player, you're not LeBron James, but you can be a good swing man off the bench.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
I mean, the people that I work with know that they will get my very best. They know that I'll have my lines memorized. They know that I will take direction. They know that I will give them every ounce of my passion and my energy to make whatever production it is the best it can possibly be. So even with with any endeavor, I am a perfect. I think I'm kind of a perfect representation. I'm a perfect personification, I should say, of that old adage: "Jack of all trades, master of none." I feel like I've developed a lot of skills in a lot of areas, and if I had only focused on one, I'd probably be really good at that one.
Yeah.
But I end up loving so many different things. Music. I play the piano, I sing, I produce professionally, I engineer, I sound design. I mean, I have so many different creative interests that I find myself often very fragmented by all the things that I love doing. And I kind of consider my life like a big piece of pie. And at any given time, there's at any given time, any particular piece might be bigger than another piece. Like, this month, for instance, I'm doing a lot of voice acting work. So the voice acting piece of my pie might be larger. But then next month, we're shooting, we may be shooting an episode. And so the acting, the Star Trek and on-camera stuff would be the larger piece of the pie. And then maybe in 3 months, I may be producing a new record. And so the music piece of the pie would be larger. So I feel like my life is separated into a bunch of different things that I love to do. And at any given different time, each of those things that I really enjoy doing creatively has a different percentage of my time and attention.
Yeah. So, did you write any of the 3 Star Trek Continues episodes?
I actually wrote all 3 of them.
Okay. So, is that something that has come after acting, or did you write screenplays for
Well, let me clarify. I wrote the stories. I wrote the first story, and I wrote the second story with my friend Houston Huddleston, and then I wrote the third story. And then wrote the screenplay with my dear friend and Star Trek Continues team member James Kerwin, and he also directed the episode. I've been writing. I've written stage plays. I've written several things over the years, but again, I don't consider writing my my main strong suit. I'll
Yeah.
be honest with you, Dan. The only reason I wrote the first 3 episodes was because I couldn't find any stories that really thrilled me.
Uh-huh.
I was having a hard time finding stories that I felt were akin to the original series. And so I made up these stories, and then I handed the stories off to screenwriters to write the stories,
Uh-huh.
to basically turn them into screenplays. Like like, for instance, I'll give you an example. For the first episode, Pilgrim of Eternity.
Which we should say is a continuation or a sequel to an original episode where Apollo the god, is that the one where he actually grips the
Yes, it
Enterprise
is.
in his hand? Yeah.
Yes, it is. The title of the episode was Who Mourns for Adonis?
Yeah.
And we actually, for those of you who don't know, we actually got the actor who
Yeah.
played Apollo 45 years ago to reprise his role. It was
Right, right.
absolutely a thrill and an honor to have Mike Forrest
Yeah.
in that first episode. But I wrote the episode, I wrote the story, and I broke it down. It was about a 2 or 3 page story treatment, and I broke it down into the 4 acts. And like, I want Act 1 to end here, and Act 2 will build to this climax, and Act 3 will end here. And then I handed that off to Jack Trevino and Steve Fratt, who were script writers, and they actually turned that story into a screenplay. And then they give it back to me, and very much in Roddenberry fashion, I would do script editing on it and tweak it
Yeah.
to make it what I envisioned for the story. And then we shot it. So that's kind of become our model.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting because I know in that show, there was like the ones, I guess it would be considered a stunt where he sort of lifts you up by his will, and and the thing, and that got me thinking, because you had mentioned that you had put in a lot of your own money to bring this show into production, but since
Yeah.
this is fan fiction and you're not allowed to make money over it, I'm just wondering, what happens if, let's say, you had gotten hurt there, or another actor had gotten hurt? Do you have insurance? Are you required to have insurance on the set? I mean, maybe most people might not think of that, but you'd have to think of that, I would think.
Yeah, we have a limited, we have a limited liability.
Yeah,
Plus, we have everybody signs waivers
yeah,
when they come, because they understand that this is not a multi-million-dollar production.
yeah,
You know what I mean? If something happens here, I'm sorry, we don't have $1 million to,
yeah,
to pay you. And so everybody understands that.
yeah,
There's not one penny of profit being made from Star Trek Continues. I have put in, literally, personally, tens of thousands of dollars that I will never see again.
uh-huh.
But that's not why I did it.
Yeah,
I didn't make Star Trek Continues to make money. I always knew that it was not a money-making venture, and that was fine with me. It's a passion project.
right.
And a lot of people don't understand that, Dan. A lot of people, they can't even wrap their minds around the concept of doing something to this degree and this much complexity that requires this much work and this much money and this many people and this much planning, and not make any money back. I mean,
Yeah.
who does that? Well,
Yeah.
people that have a passion for something. And so I don't mind that we're not making money. And after we made the first episode, we launched a Kickstarter,
Yeah, I saw that.
and we used the first episode as an example of what we could do. A lot of people launch Kickstarters to try to raise money for something they haven't even done yet.
Yeah,
And how many people could tell horror stories about giving to a production, and whatever happened to that product?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to that production? It was never released, or it was released and it wasn't any good. So I didn't feel ethically comfortable with asking people to give us money for Star Trek Continues before they knew what we were capable of.
yeah,
So we made the first one. I put my own money where my mouth is, so to speak, and made the first one. And then the first one became a proof of concept, if you will,
yeah,
of what we were capable of. If people wanted to see more, they could donate, and that's what happened. And we raised enough money to make 3 more episodes, and we've done exactly that in a year and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, in a year and a half.
Yeah. And
we have 3 episodes out. We're getting ready to shoot our 4th episode, yeah, at the beginning of the year, and 4th and 5th actually concurrently.
Okay. Now, you know, it's interesting because we'll just go with this flow here. So, if what you had mentioned earlier, how you know, you don't make money, and the right by, I guess it's Columbia Television or CBS.
Well, no, CBS owns the television rights to Star Trek, and Paramount owns the feature film rights.
Okay, but the characters of James Kirk and Spock and whatnot, who owns them?
I can't answer.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, because I'm thinking, suppose, let's say, you know, your 4th or 5th episode is your most successful one. I'm just wondering, suppose not J.J. Abrams, but someone from the Star Trek people says, you know, we're going to remake that episode into a feature film. Would you get any money, or is it just like, sorry, Charlie, you know, you had a great idea, but you wouldn't have had the idea if we didn't give you your characters? Do you have to sign any waivers on anything like that?
Well, CBS is very gracious in allowing fan films to exist.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, you know, they could drop the hammer and say, you know, this is our property and we do not allow you to do this.
Yeah.
But they've been very kind to the fans in allowing the fans to do it, as long as they don't monetize it.
Yeah.
As long as you don't make money. And that's, to be honest with you, I mean, that's why projects like any of these other fan productions, Star Trek-based fan productions, are even in existence, is because CBS allows it as long as they don't make money.
It's de facto free advertising for them too.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just smart.
Yeah.
I mean, why not let fans spend their own money promoting your project?
Right, right.
And you know, I mean, George Lucas came to the same conclusion about Star Wars fan films.
Yeah.
I mean, why not let fans make Star Wars fan films, as long as they're not making any money or charging or selling them? Why not let them make them? And then while you're making the next feature film, the fans are keeping your brand alive.
Right.
So let me answer the other question you asked about if CBS or Paramount saw one of our episodes and they really liked the idea and wanted to make it. We can copyright the story.
Yeah.
The story is original.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can register the story. But obviously we don't own the characters.
Right.
So I would expect that if we registered the story and copyrighted the story, let's say the Mirror Mirror episode that we just did, and somebody and CBS decided to make some kind of an official feature based on the Mirror episode, and they wanted to use our basic story, I would assume that there would be some kind of a negotiation for compensation, because it was an original creative work that would be registered. But we don't own the characters, so they wouldn't have to ask us permission, or we have no rights or leverage or power at all when it comes to the characters.
The reason I ask is because, you know, I'm a writer as well, and I know recently, just a couple of years ago, James Joyce's works finally came into the public domain, and his grandson was a real son of a bitch when it came to overcharging. He would literally release a new copy of a Joyce book with a few editorial changes, supposed new ones, and try to recopyright the whole thing again. It was just a terrible money-making scheme. So
wow.
I was just wondering in regards to that. But anyway, let's end this segment, and when we get back, we'll talk some more with Vic on his career. Back with Vic Mignogna. Vic, we're going to talk now about your voice acting career. Now, I know that when we say voice acting, is that basically doing a voice dubbing for films, or is that doing cartoons, or is it all of the above?
Well, it's predominantly animation. It's predominantly animation, and again, I wouldn't necessarily call it cartoon animation, because some people would say that, like, Japanese anime and stuff like that is not really cartoons. It's a little more dramatic, a little more heavy hitting than cartoons are. But I have also done plenty of cartoons. I've done over 300 different animated series and video games. As I said at the very top of the interview, stuff like Full Metal Alchemist and Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon and Pac-Man and Marvel superheroes and Wolverine and Iron Man and a whole slew of those kind of things, and video games as well. And I've been doing that for about 16 or 17 years. I love it. I never expected to be a voice actor. I just wanted to be an actor. And one day somebody approached me and said, "Hey, you ought to go and audition for this place in town. They dub these Japanese animated shows into English, and they're looking for actors." And I went and auditioned and got cast, and have been doing it ever since. And
have you ever done dubs for like European films that come into America? I know mostly they're subtitled, but back in the 60s and 70s, dubbing was big with like Sergio Leone films. So have you ever done any of that?
Well, I have done some dubbing for live action, yes. I've done some dubbing for, certainly dubbing for Japanese films. I've dubbed Japanese live action films into English. I've dubbed a couple of Spanish films into English. I've dubbed some French films into English. So I've certainly done some live action dubbing as well.
When you do just voice acting, obviously you don't have to put on a face, and you don't have to hold a mic. You don't have to project like you're doing stage drama. But what is unique about voice acting that other branches of acting you don't have to? Is it you have to get the timbre of the voice just so, or what?
Well, I would say the answer to that is that every single bit of character communication must come through the voice.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that may seem kind of obvious, but if you think about it, Dan, if you're a stage actor, think of all the tools that you have at your disposal to communicate your character. You have facial expressions, you have gestures, you have body language, you have costume.
Yeah.
None of which serve you at all as a voice actor. So the big challenge in voice acting is that you have to communicate all of the emotional elements of the character completely through the voice.
Yeah.
And you might be surprised. It's a lot harder than people may think it is. I've often said it's the people that really do it well that make it look easy.
Yeah.
Or that make it seem easy. But I've worked with a lot of on-camera actors who have tried their hand at voice acting, and they were very surprised that it was much more difficult than they thought it would be. Another element of it is that with anime in particular, the animation is already done, which means that now not only do you have the challenge of playing the role of the character with your voice authentically and believably, but you also have to match the mouth movements of the character. So that in itself is a challenge. So it's a lot more difficult than people think. Some people are really good at playing a character vocally, and some people are really good at matching the mouth movements of a character, but to do them both at the same time is a little bit more challenging.
Well, I would think some cartoons are easier than others, like the Beavis and Butthead kind of cartoons, where they're sort of herky-jerky, are not, they're going to be the multi-million-dollar Disney cartoons with the voice.
Well, but there's a very significant difference, and the reason, the big difference is that all of those things are what we call prelay.
Prelay.
In other words, they lay down the voice first.
Oh, okay, and then they
record all the voices first. I mean, how many times have we seen behind-the-scenes videos of actors recording the voices for animated characters in a movie? Pixar or DreamWorks, or you know what I mean, or some of these big features. They bring the actors in, and the actors have complete freedom to perform the role, to perform the lines exactly the way they want. They don't have to match any mouth movements. They just perform the role, and then the animators have the responsibility of matching the animation to the actor's vocal performance. That is completely different from what we're doing.
Yeah.
What we do is completely on the opposite side of the spectrum. The animation is already done, and we have a huge challenge to match the animation while at the same time still acting the character believably.
Yeah.
Even Beavis and Butthead, that stuff is all recorded. The audio is all recorded first, and then they animate the animation to the vocal recording.
Okay. Now, another type of voice acting, if you will. Have you ever done narrations for documentaries?
Yes, I have. And I wouldn't necessarily consider that voice acting. That's more voice. That's more what we would consider voiceover.
Okay, voiceover.
You know, like for instance, voiceover would be like commercial work. You know, if you're suffering from hemorrhoids, call Dr. So-and-so at 1-800.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not voice acting. That's just like announcer voiceover work.
Yeah.
But when you're playing a character and you're having to communicate the ups and downs and highs and lows emotionally of a character, that's more voice acting.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move a little bit beyond now the voice acting. Let's get back to acting in general. Your role in acting. Now, I know you said that you got into acting because of Star Trek and William Shatner. Outside of that, if you could have a dream role, say on stage, on television, on film, what kind of a role? If it might be playing Othello, but what kind of a role, if you could have an original role, would entice you and make you say, "Boy, I'd love to have done." Or if there's a role that's come out in a film or a television series the last 10, 15 years, it's like, God, I wish I had gotten that one.
I don't know that I could ever narrow that down to just one role.
Yeah.
I've heard other actor friends of mine say before, what role would you like to play most? And a lot of my actor friends will say all of them. I mean, I know that sounds kind of funny, but and a bit strange. But in truth, I don't know that there's any one role that any actor wants to play, and once they've done that, like, wow, that just would be the best of the best. Yeah. For me, to be honest with you, if I had to pick one, it would be Captain Kirk.
Oh yeah. And
I'm getting the opportunity to do that now. Obviously not on the scale of a Chris Pine, and JJ's Star Trek, but I am getting to fulfill that dream. And so I just love acting, Dan. I love acting, and when people call me and say, "Hey, do you want to play a role in such and such?" I'm like, "Sure," because in my mind, it's just another opportunity to act, and I enjoy acting.
Okay, we'll end this segment, and when we get back, we'll focus a little bit, I guess, on your Star Trek Continues, maybe a little bit of thoughts on Star Trek itself, and then when we head towards the end of the interview in a couple of segments, we'll basically just wrap up with some more about you, your life, where your career is heading. So stay with us. And we are with actor, writer, director Vic Mignogna. And we just got finished talking with Vic about his acting career and also about his voice work. So let's head back to Star Trek. And I know, Vic, you had said that Star Trek and William Shatner's performance is what got you into acting. You did seem to be a little bit jaded, and I think I share your jadedness regarding the reboot of the Star Trek film series. So why don't we start there and then talk about some of the other series that went on and some of your opinions on that, because I'm sure a lot of Star Trek people would like to hear that. I haven't seen the second Star Trek film. The first one to me was just silly. It was jokey. It was the antithesis of what you said. Your Star Trek Continues was character based. This was all about gesticulation and posing. What was your take on those movies?
Well, here's my take on the movies. I am glad if J.J. Abrams' Star Trek reboots are introducing a new generation of fans to Star Trek. Mm-hmm. Inasmuch as they are bringing attention to Star Trek with the new movies. I am grateful for that. I appreciate that. Having said that, I do not feel that the new movies, and to be quite honest with you, many of the subsequent series of Star Trek that were on television,
Yeah.
I don't believe that they capture what it was that made the original series so endearing and so iconic. Many people have said, what did you think of the J.J. Abrams movies? And I would say, well, they were quite exciting and lots of adventure and lots of fun space battles.
Plot driven. You know,
they weren't
not character driven.
But they weren't Star Trek.
Yeah.
That's often the way I've said it. I've often said, I enjoyed them. They were fun, but they weren't Star Trek.
Yeah. It to me, it's like making a classic. I don't know if you've ever seen it, the cowboy film Shane, and then remaking it as a hip hop blockbuster. You know, it just takes it out of the world of what made that a special Western film.
Yeah, and I mean, I've told people many times when I've been asked this question, and as you can imagine, I've been asked it many times.
Yeah.
And my feeling about it is this. I felt like every incarnation of Star Trek got further and further away from whatever it was that made Star Trek special in the first place. I felt like each subsequent series of Star Trek movies, they tended to get further away from what people loved about the original series.
Yeah.
I mean, the original series of Star Trek never won any awards for special effects.
Yeah.
It never won any awards for costumes. It never won any awards for makeup. It never won, you know what I mean? It won awards for story, and it was endearing and popular because of the characters and the story and the character-driven nature of the show. In fact, I told a lot of people, Star Trek is all about the characters and the human condition. It just happens to take place in space.
Yeah.
I mean, it just happens to be set in the future. It doesn't have to be. You know what I mean? It's just great storytelling that happens to take place in the 23rd century. So I love the original series, and inasmuch as any of the subsequent Star Trek series capture some of that same magic, I love them. But I don't feel like the new movies really focus on that. I don't think that was their goal.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't blame them. It wasn't their goal. That's not what they were trying to do. It
reminds me, because what you're describing is sort of the drift away from the original show, and that brings up two things that just came to mind. Is number one, I saw on Netflix a few years ago they had added new special effects into the old show, and I was like that. Didn't they learn from when they tried to when Turner tried to colorize Citizen Kane or something? You know, it's like it just seems ridiculous. And so I mean, yes, I guess you could say it brings it into the same century. But you know, one of the things that was the charms about the original show is the salt and pepper shakers that McCoy used.
Sure.
And whatnot.
Sure.
But in reality, that's more high tech because technology gets simpler and smaller. So having a big ship like Alien come after that, things are going to get smaller. You know, if they did a Star Trek in the 30th century, they're not going to be these big ships. People are going to be whizzing around almost godlike because technology gets better. So I always thought the original show was the most futuristic looking.
Right. Right. Well, I think you need to remember, too, Dan, that the people that released the special edition, or whatever you want to call it, the digitally remastered, enhanced version of the original series, I mean, their primary purpose is to make money.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way at all. I'm saying
money's good. Money's good. It's capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. They're a company. I mean, the whole purpose of all of that was to make something that people would enjoy and that people would want to pay to see. I mean, that's the whole purpose of television or movies or magazines or music.
Yeah.
But I don't blame I don't blame CBS or Paramount one bit for re-releasing the series, having it color corrected and on Blu-ray. It looks amazing. It looks absolutely amazing, especially when you consider that it's almost 50 years old. Mm-hmm. But I think that along those same lines, they were looking for things that they could do to make it marketable, to appeal to new customers. And I think that remastering and putting in new special effects was part of that decision.
Now,
so I don't blame them. They're just trying to make a living, and good on them. That's the whole point of a company, is to make a living and help people pay their bills and everything. And I have no problem with that at all. Now, I'm with you. I enjoyed the original effects. I thought that they were charming in their own cheesy way, and they added to. They were part of what made the original series so wonderful. So that's why. And I hate to bring it back to Star Trek Continues, but that's why when we started charting the course for our series, the decision was very clearly, we want our effects to look like the original effects.
Yeah. And it does, and I think that's one of the good things. And I know this is heresy to say, but also on Netflix, I got a chance about a year and a half ago to watch Star Trek, the animated series. And I will say the stories there are the second best ones to the original ones, because they were a lot of leftover stories from the original series, and I think that's one of the smartest cartoons that was ever on Saturday mornings. And I would say that's the second best Star Trek show, even if it's not considered canon, over all of the other live action ones. I don't know if you ever saw them, but
well, as a matter of fact, I watched them because they were on when I was a little boy, and when I fell in love with Star Trek, I started watching the animated Star Trek. Yeah. What thrilled me was that they had all the original actors voicing their characters, so I really loved that. But and I have been told by several people, you ought to go back and look at the animated series and see if there are any stories that you could adapt from there. There
was the Panther woman, or there was one of the crew members was from the Panther world, or she was a Puma or something.
Right.
And I think though, I don't think Walter Koenig was on that show, because I think I read somewhere in it that actually James Doohan was great at voices, and maybe his son can tell you some stories. But I think James Doohan did Chekhov, and he might have even done Sulu too on that animated series. So that's what I read online. So take it for what it's worth.
I'll check it out. I don't know the answer to that.
So let's just end up this segment getting back to your version of Star Trek. Let's talk about, you said in the next year you're going to have a couple more episodes. Are they derivative? Are they taken from continuations of earlier episodes, or are they totally new? Are we going to be seeing any new aliens, or what?
Well, without wanting to give too much away,
okay,
let me say this.
Just a teaser.
Our first episode was a sequel.
Uh-huh.
Our second episode was completely original.
Uh-huh.
Our third episode was, I wouldn't call it so much of a sequel as
reimagining.
As running as an episode that was running concurrent with an original series episode. If you think about it, our third episode was the story of what was happening on the Mirror Enterprise.
Yeah.
At the same time as what was going on in the Prime universe. So it's not so much a sequel as it was kind of a continuation of the original Mirror. Now, our fourth episode is an original story. It's a wonderful original dramatic story. Very character-based, and we did that on purpose because our third episode is very action-oriented. But the fourth episode is going to be very dramatic, very character-based. And then the 5th episode is completely original. Our fourth episode will have some elements that people will recognize. I'll just say that much. But it is a completely original story.
And these are both due in 2015?
Oh, it's absolutely. In fact, also, let me say this. We've been trying to average 2 episodes a year. And so far, that's what we've done successfully. We will be doing that again. And we're planning on shooting a couple of episodes almost at the same time at the beginning of next year. And then we'll probably be shooting again, later in the year, in the fall. And, the number of episodes that we do is really dependent upon a couple of variables. Number one, do we have any good stories? Because like I told you at the very beginning of our interview, story. It's all about story to me. Story. If we don't have good stories, we're not going to make one. Unlike a lot of fan productions who are like, well, it's that time of year again, I guess we should make an episode. We're not going to make one just because it's time to make one. I feel very strongly about making good, compelling stories. One of the reasons, quite honestly, I mean, we shot episode 3 in March of this year, and we released it in June. And the only reason why we haven't shot episode 4 in September or October is because I didn't feel good about the script yet.
Yeah.
We were still working on the script because I don't want to do a crummy script just because, quote unquote, it's time to make another one. So the first variable would be having good stories. A second variable would be having the money. A third variable would be people's schedules, because since everybody's a volunteer and you've got 20 or 30, 35 people all descending on the sets to shoot it, to make an episode, it's as you can imagine, it's a scheduling challenge.
Right.
Everybody has their jobs and their families and their careers and responsibilities, so it's sometimes tricky from a scheduling standpoint.
Well, which leads into my question. If you have a production that's going to go in, say, in October, and let's say your agent comes and says, Vic, we've got this great gig that's coming up shooting in Italy, and it could be a role that could get you a lot of notice, and it's a paying job. Which do you take? Do you stick with the Star Trek, or do you take the money?
Well, let me say this. It would depend on the opportunity.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I have been offered appearance opportunities and gigs that would take place during a shoot, and I have turned some of them down because I felt like the shoot needed to take priority. However, those opportunities may have just been a very small opportunity, or that may have been something that could easily be done at a different time.
Yeah.
However, if, like your scenario, somebody says, we want you to play the lead role in this big feature film, and it's going to be, $800,000 or something.
Yeah.
Well, then certainly it would make sense that, that I would need for my own, I got to pay my bills like everybody else.
Right.
I would probably do that, and we would have to reschedule. But let me also say this. We've got actors in our show, and sometimes if they've got a big opportunity and they're not able to get out of it, or they don't want to get out of it, then we would either rewrite the story so that they had limited responsibilities in the episode, or maybe reschedule depending on, each situation is unique. You know what I mean? Each situation has its own variables, and we would have to decide it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
It depends on the size of the opportunity, and it depends on how easy it would be to reschedule. It depends on who it is and their level of involvement in the episode. Let me give an example. let's say that Grant Imahara from Mythbusters, who plays Sulu,
Yeah.
let's say that our next episode, Grant has 15 or 20 lines of dialogue, and he's just on the bridge, and the story is basically about McCoy and Spock. If Grant calls me and says, hey, dude, they just hired me to do this big gig, and I really need to take it, blah, 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 I'm not going to be able to make it. Well, we're not going to reschedule the whole shoot.
Yeah.
What we would do is we would do what the original series did. We'd have some other character at the helm station.
Yeah.
Or we'd give his lines to Chekhov. Or, you know what I mean? It depends. Each situation depends on the details of the situation.
And in the 3 episodes, have you had all the actors play all the characters throughout? I think you have, haven't you?
Yes, there was one episode, our second episode, Lolani. If you go back and look, Chekhov was not in that episode.
Okay.
He was originally supposed to be, but very much like the example I just gave you.
Yeah.
It was not a huge, it was not a huge pivotal role that we needed him for 5 or 6 or 7 days. And the actor who plays Chekhov for us was not available during the dates that we had scheduled. So I asked my dear friend Daniel Logan, who Star Wars fans would recognize as young Boba Fett, to come in and play another officer who is manning the navigation station in the episode. I mean, they did this all the time in the original series.
Yeah.
There were plenty of episodes that Uhura was not at the communication station. It was Lieutenant Palmer. And there was another actor in Chekhov's place from time to time. And they switched people around a lot.
We'll end and come back with Vic to wrap up the interview in a few moments. All right, and we're going to end the second Dan Schneider video interview with Vic Mignogna. Let's just talk about what's coming up. We mentioned that you have a couple of episodes coming up in 2015 on the Star Trek Continues. What big is coming up? You had mentioned that you did some video games. I'm not a gamer. What other projects are coming up for release, be they voiceover, anime, or whatnot?
Well, what's kind of funny, Dan, is I'm not a gamer either. I mean, I don't play video games really, but I enjoy working on them. I'm working on 6 or 7 different animated series right now.
Okay.
Some of them have not yet been released, so I'm not at liberty to talk about them. But I am working on 6 or 7 different animated series. I've done a couple of video games lately that haven't been released yet. Obviously, the Star Trek Continues production takes a massive amount of my time. I do event appearances all over the country and internationally. So if anyone interested would like to come and say hello in person, you can go to my fan club page. It's called www.risemboolrangers.com. RISEMBOOL, risemboolrangers.com, and that's my fan club, my online fan club. We have about 35,000 members worldwide, and you can see my convention appearance schedule there, and lots of other fun stuff related to my voice acting work. I do a lot of event appearances, and I'll be, in a couple of weeks, I'll be at the MCM Expo in Birmingham, England. I'll be at another event in Jacksonville coming up, and several lined up next year. But between my voice acting work and both in animation and video games, and Star Trek Continues, and traveling to event appearances, and having a relationship, the plate is pretty full. So I'm very, 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 and I always want to make sure and say this, I'm very, very grateful to God for the privilege and the opportunity to do things that I love doing. For me, it's not about making a lot of money as much as it is just doing things that I really have a passion for, and I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to do that.
I saw online there was a photo, or maybe it was even a short video of you with William Shatner. Are you guys from the fan fiction shows or whatnot? Are you guys ever invited to the like official Star Trek conventions?
Well, I will say that I do, because of my voice acting work. I do a lot of the I do a lot of convention appearances, and in fact, Bill and I have done probably at least 6 or 7 conventions together where we've both been signing autographs at the event. Just last weekend, actually, 1 week ago, right now, 1 week ago today, I was a guest, a signing guest at the Rhode Island Comic Con, and Bill was there, and we actually got to have dinner and chatted a little bit. I'm, as you can imagine, a big fan of his, but also have become. I'd like to think we've become friends. We don't talk about Star Trek. We talk about probably everything else, and so I get the opportunity. I've had the privilege to actually become friends with people like Brent Spiner and Marina Sirtis and Michael Dorn and George Takei and Nichelle Nichols and Bill and Walter Koenig. But it's a real privilege to get to do these events, not from the fan side of the table, but from the guest, the autographing guest side of the table. It's really a privilege.
Would Shatner be like your ultimate guest star if you could get him to even just do 5 minute appearance, like in a
Oh,
flashback
absolutely.
or flash forward? You know,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. That would be right. I mean, that would be like what an honor that would be.
yeah. Okay, Vic, let me just end this interview. Give you a minute or two if you want to just say anything about anything, your career or anything. The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank the fans. I want to thank people that have been supportive of not only the voice acting work that I've done over the years, but also the Star Trek Continues production. When I started voice acting, I never imagined where it would take me. I never imagined that I would have the opportunity to play roles in shows that people really loved and that people really uh, gravitated to. I've heard so many stories over the years about work that I've done really helping people through a difficult time in their life, or helping them rekindle a relationship that had gone bad. A number of very moving stories, and I'm so very, very honored to be a part of people's lives in that way. And then, as far as Star Trek is concerned, I made Star Trek Continues without any concept of a conception, I should say, of how it would be received, how many people would watch it, how many people would enjoy it, and it has far exceeded any of my wildest dreams of people enjoying what we're doing. So, again, thank you to the Star Trek fans for your support and your love and embracing what we're doing. Hopefully, we'll get to do it for 4 or 5 more years, maybe 5 year mission, and I'm going to continue voice acting as much as I can and making the best Star Trek that we can. And again, not for money, just for love of Star Trek. And I'm so very, very grateful for the privilege to get to do the things that I do, and I hope that God allows me to get to do them for many years to come.
Well, thank you for being interviewed, and for people who have enjoyed either the first interview that I did with Alex Sheremit or this interview with Vic Mignogna. Future interviews, I'll have a well-known Broadway actress. I'll have people from the Prisoner Appreciation Society, those people who like science fiction, and also some scientists and artists and thinkers. So please tune in for that. And again, thank you, Vic Mignogna.